catch up again with the Australian Defence Association's Neil James. Neil, we spoke to you last week, and now we see the detail of these allegations, the findings, effectively, of the ADF. You think about the ADF and the terrible days they've had on the battlefield and other accidents where lives have been lost, but in many ways this is worse. This is a darker day because it strikes at their very soul, their very character.
Yeah, it's a big problem, Chris. I mean, we had the odd war crime in previous wars, but it tended to be an isolated incident. This has been systematic over a long period of time by a determined group of individuals and can't possibly be excused by the heat of battle. I mean, all of these people murdered, or the vast majority of them, as the report notes, were actually murdered after capture. So there was no combat going on when they were captured. In fact, they'd been disarmed and were killed anyway, and killed intentionally. And in 5 cases were killed to blood junior soldiers, allegedly, so they could be proper members of the patrol concerned. There is no excuse for this. There never will be an excuse for it. Things like this aren't just what happens in any war. They are war crimes, they are unprofessional, and they're not done by soldiers. And let's hope the FedPol, when they do the investigations, if they're guilty, throws the book at them.
Well, one of those instances, those aspects you mentioned there is just so shocking, virtually suggesting that Afghan individuals or prisoners were executed as some sort of initiation ceremony for our soldiers.
Yeah, 5 cases of what they called blooding, where a junior soldier had to kill a prisoner as his first kill, supposedly to make him special in terms of that patrol's culture. It's just disgraceful. And this is not a case of heat of battle stuff. This is cold-blooded killing for no purpose, and in fact a counterproductive purpose, because it simply boosts Taliban propaganda about the alleged brutality of international forces by giving a few examples of actual brutality. And that's one of the reasons why the Chief of Defence Force, no doubt, made such a profound apology to Afghanistan this morning, and why we'll probably end up paying a lot of compensation, just as we paid compensation for battlefield accidents.
Now, we've talked before about the difficult legal processes here. This stuff happened a long time ago in a foreign country. What do we know about the legal processes, the question of evidence? Do we expect that justice can be served here and can be served promptly?
Well, justice will be served reasonably quickly and easily in some cases, because the evidence will come from witnesses in Australia, generally from the unit and subunits concerned. So that won't be a problem. Evidence that relies purely on Afghan witnesses will obviously be a lot more difficult, which is why the Federal Police Commissioner mentioned in a talk to the Press Club about 4 months ago it might take up to a decade in some cases. There will have to probably be some legal changes legislatively, for the simple reason the federal court doesn't have jury trials, and when you're trying people for war crimes, they're obviously going to opt for a jury and not trial by judge alone. So there'll have to be a little bit of fiddling about whether this is going to be done in the ACT Supreme Court or a state Supreme Court, who are used to handling criminal matters, because it certainly won't be a job pretty much for the federal court unless all of a sudden they introduce juries to it.
The other aspect is whether you can get a fair trial given how much information is in the public arena, and I guess that's just one of the key reasons we've seen no names put forward by the ADF so far. I just want to get your thoughts, Neil, also on the fact that medals and citations are being stripped from groups of soldiers, innocent of any charges, that they might all have to give up some medals and citations. Is this fair and appropriate?
Well, you've got to send a symbolic message, and in fact they're not being taken away from the people who aren't involved. That the unit commendation for the meritorious citation will be taken away from one of the SOTGs concerned, because quite frankly the service wasn't meritorious and it's undeserved. In the case of individuals, meritorious service medals won't be taken away from people who did nothing wrong. But they look like being taken away from some of the commanders whose meritorious service medals depended on meritorious service. And the argument now is that the service wasn't meritorious because war crimes occurred on their watch, and whilst they weren't legally responsible, they bear a moral responsibility. And the phraseology used in the report is, in all good conscience, they could not retain their medals. So perhaps they're hinting that some people might want to surrender them rather than have them stripped. But who knows? But these type of actions are needed to not only send home the cultural change and organisational and legal messages that need to be sent, you also need to send the simple symbolic message that Australian soldiers don't commit war crimes. And when they do, they're not Australian soldiers.
Thanks so much for joining us, Neil.
Thanks, Chris.